Good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about the creation of the universe. And before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about what to expect. On each of these slides, I'm going to have uh, information of who I got my sources from. So there's several books that I had to read and a lot of research that I've done to put into this. And so I put that at the bottom of the slides just so you can have the references. And at the end, there'll be a bibliography, but I'm not going to keep going back and saying exactly where as we go, just for ease of fluid and movement. Okay. So as we get started in this topic, the reason we are here today is because I've noticed an alarming trend in our churches. Um, God has given me this passion for young people, this 18 to 24, 25 group, where they graduate high school and then they leave the church. And it seems like they don't ever come back. And it's why do we have this age group of people just walking away from God? We watch them grow up and they're young in the church and they're singing in the choir and they're speaking out and they're doing this stuff and they're praising God and they seem like they genuinely love God, but then they get to that age group and they seem to walk away. They walk away from Christianity, they walk away from God, and it's really disturbing to see what's wrong, what happened. So I've talked to several people who have left the church, and I found out there's this common theme. The common theme is that as they've gotten older and they start studying science and they start getting more education, they start to realize that what they have been taught their entire lives, they now believe that to be a lie. And if science proves that the Bible is a lie, just one single thing, because we talk about how the Bible is inerrant and perfect, and there is nothing wrong in the Bible, that everything is truth. And when somebody points out, well, here's a lie based on science, then it causes them to question everything they believe, and they walk away from it because they don't want to be a part of anything that could be full of lies. And so, as I continued to talk to these people, I found out one of the big areas that we're discussing is the creation of the universe. They believe that the creation of the universe does not line up with what science is teaching. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how the science matches creation or how it doesn't, and explain what we can possibly believe. You know, when I was young, I had this teacher, the Sunday school teacher in fifth grade, I walked in one day and he was tossing this puzzle up in the air over and over again. It was a puzzle of the universe, and as it was similar to this one here, and he's just tossing the pieces in the air with the expectation that they would land in just the right spot to put all these pieces together, and eventually one day, one time, when he threw the pieces, they would all just hit and magically land perfectly together. And I just thought, what are you doing? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You cannot put together a puzzle like that. And he's like, well, this puzzle only has 500 pieces. Imagine the billions upon billions of things that are a part of the universe that had to come together just right. To say that it all just came together by some pure accident that happened, or whatever, some evolutionary process from nothing, there was this huge explosion in space and all of a sudden all the parts came together. If I took this puzzle right now and put some dynamite on it and blew it up, it wouldn't put the pieces together, it would make it even worse. And so when he presented it in that way, it made me think that, wow, this science is completely ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. How can anybody believe this? And I realized that there is this creation versus evolution, religion versus science, and this war that's going on for the minds of people, instead of trying to figure out any way that there can be harmony. People believe that either religion is true or science is true, and they cannot believe that both can exist. And so before we go any further, I want to talk about the science. I want to explain what is meant by the Big Bang Theory. You know, originally, when they first discovered the science behind this, there was a Cambridge astronomer named Fred Hoyle. And Mr. Hoyle said he used this term, the Big Bang Theory, because he thought it was so ridiculous And if you use some term like that disparagingly, then people would understand how ridiculous it is and they would reject it. You see, the problem with the Big Bang Theory is that it shows that there is an origin to the universe. Up until this time, scientists believe that the universe has always existed and is constantly evolving. And so as it evolves, there's life, and then it evolves, and that life goes away, and new life takes its place, and it's just this evolving process where this new life adapts to the Earth and the universe that's there. And so, by saying that it has a starting point, has now flipped science on its head, and it does no longer is what they had believed. It's more in line with what Christians believe. So. The other thing to understand about it is it's not an explosion, right? When we hear Big Bang, we think explosion, we think destructive. We think like there's this massive destructive wave that just rippled across the universe and it blew everything apart. And when we hear that, we think it's going to destroy everything, not put it together in a precise, perfect manner that is worthy of life. And so the way this whole theory came about was that as scientists were studying the stars, they started to notice that as they're looking out, things were moving. And they're not moving at this supersonic speed or anything like that, but over the period of thousands of years, there's slight movement that's seen. And so when they're looking at this movement, they're realizing that everything in the universe is all moving away from a singular point. And not only that, the further we get away from that singular point, the faster objects are moving. So now we have this idea, well, if we reverse that and move it in the opposite direction at the current speed that it's going, what would happen? And what they realized would happen is that all matter in the entire universe would come together from wherever it's at, all to a singular point at the exact same time. And so this singular point in the universe, this idea that everything is coming together to this exact same point, means that there was nothing before this point. And so you have this nothingness, this void with no life, no matter, no energy, no time, there's just nothing. And then it's believed that all this matter and everything was stable in this tiny little microscopic point. And one day it's not stable, and it started to expand. And then when it expanded, it heats up, and then it cools, and then it just keeps going through this process of heating up and expanding and cooling, and as it's expanding. And eventually, as it's spreading apart across the now what we know of as the universe, then we have planets forming and solar systems and galaxies, and it's all started from this microscopic singular point that is smaller than an atom that was there in this vast emptiness of nothing before all time and matter and life existed. And so that is the idea of the Big Bang Theory, and it is based on what we can see and measure in the universe. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at with the science is, well, how old is the Earth? How long did all this take place? And the first thing we can look at is the speed of light. We know that the speed of light is constant. It takes 8 minutes for light from the sun to come down and reach the Earth. It takes 2.5 million years for the light from the stars in the Andromeda Galaxy to reach the Earth. It takes billions of years for the stars in the farthest reaches of visibility, the farthest reaches of space, for that light to be seen on Earth. Billions of years. So what that means is if we can see it and it takes that long, then the Earth has to at least be that old. So the Earth has to be billions of years old. When we look at the expanding universe and reverse it all back to the singular point that the Big Bang Theory has taught us, then that time it takes from the farthest stretches of space to come back to the single point, or actually for anything, because it all reaches at the same time, based on the speed that it is moving, it would take 13.8 plus or minus 0.4 billion years. So approximately 13.8 billion years is the age of the Earth based on the expansion. Okay. Now, when we look at this, okay, so we got light from stars, we have movement of objects in space, and we say, okay, that those things have taken that long to move, it takes that long to see the light. Like, does that really mean that the Earth is billions of years old? So, I mean, if the Earth is newer than the universe, the stars can be there, and we would still see it when the Earth was formed. But we can look at the Earth itself, and if you're familiar with age rings, like the rings on a tree, there's other things in the Earth that have the same thing. So when we look at ice glaciers, there's lines in ice glaciers, and those lines are developed every year from the new ice that is formed. And so there's ice glaciers that are billions of years old. The other thing that we can look at, the ice glaciers are millions of years old. The other thing that we can look at is sedimentary rock. You know, we get the sedimentary rock. You can see the lines that go across the sedimentary rock. Again, these are age lines. And when we look at the sedimentary rocks, we can see that there are some on Earth that are millions of years old. So just by evidence on Earth from ice and rock, the Earth is at least millions of years old. Okay. So now we want to look at some biblical data. And when we look at the biblical data, the first thing I would like to do is look at Genesis 1. Okay. And in Genesis 1 through 5, it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and desolate, emptiness, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, 'Let there be light.' And there was light. God saw the light was good. And God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day." Okay, so we have this image in Genesis where God created everything. And you know, the thing with this passage, it has been interpreted in several different ways. And it all stems around one word. It stems around the word Yom. And the Hebrew word Yom can be interpreted a few different ways. And so the primary way that it is interpreted, when you look in the English Bible and read it, it is read as day. The other thing that you can look at when you see this, the day, the reason why it is believed to be a singular day, 24 hours by many Christians, is because of the scripture itself. When you look at the verse, it says there was morning and there was evening the first day. So if there's morning and evening, it's describing the day. One morning, one evening, 24 hours day. Okay? The other thing that we can see when we look throughout Scripture is that every time the Hebrew word Yom is used in conjunction with a number, it is always used to mean a 24-hour day. So that would mean that the earth was created in 6 days. 6 24-hour days was the time it took to create the earth based on the biblical view. Okay. Now, not everyone believes that. Okay, there is some evidence that Yom can mean other things. So there's several reasons for this belief. When you look throughout Scripture, Yom is also used to mean a portion of daylight hours. Another meaning is all daylight hours. And finally, the last meaning we see is a finite period of time. Right? it's a period of time that has a beginning and an end, but it does not have to be a 24-hour day. Right? So in English, we have similar words that we use to mean something like this. So if we use the word minute, right? Most people take minute to mean 60 seconds, 60 seconds. However, it can also mean an extreme long period of time. You know, when somebody says something to the effect of, "Wow, I haven't seen that for a minute," they're not talking about 60 seconds. They're talking for years. They're talking for a long, extended period of time. So, yom, meaning day, is used in the same way. A finite period of time. So it is a finite period, but it can be a period of longer than a day. So when we look at Genesis 2, we see some evidence of this, right? So in Genesis 2, we see Adam was created in the same day. So yeah, all the animals were created, then Adam was created, then Adam named all the animals, and then from there, Adam was put to sleep. He was put into a deep sleep. And then his rib was removed, and God created woman. He created Eve out of his rib. And then he woke up, and God taught them, Adam and Eve, the responsibility of the garden. So all this took place in the same day. And the interesting thing is that when Adam saw Eve, he said, "Hapam," which means at last. It's an exclamation. So he was lonely in the garden. God saw that he was lonely. That was not good. He created a woman. And then when he saw that woman, he exclaims, "At last," which gives you the image that this isn't a single day. This whole process gives you the image that this was a finite period of time that was longer than a day. So it's easy to see where people might believe that each day of creation could have been some period of time that may have been billions of years, or thousands of years, or hundreds of thousands of years, millions of it could be any time longer than that one single day. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about science, and we've talked about some biblical perspective here of the creation story of whether it's 24 hours or longer. And the thing is, no matter how we look at it, it seems like there is this disparity where science and religion just don't agree. You know, how can the Earth be 6,000 years old when the evidence of it shows that it's over 13 billion years old? How can this be reconciled? And so I reread Genesis 1 again, and just like we read it a few minutes ago, you know, it starts with God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Verse 1, God created the heavens, and in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So there was nothing, just like the Big Bang Theory says. And then God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? So this resulted in him creating the earth and the universe, right? So when we talk about heavens, a lot of times that means the universe. So the stars, the solar systems, the galaxies, that's the heavens, the heavenly bodies. So then we talk about the earth. So God created all that. But then when we look at verse 2 of Genesis, we see that the earth was formless and desolate and empty. So God created this earth that was formless and desolate and empty. And I try to put a picture here to give you an idea of there being some formless mass of something that's empty in space. And so that is the image that we have of the earth. So God created the universe, and the earth is there, but there's nothing there with it. Okay, so this gives you an image of the Big Bang Theory. There's nothing. God decided to create. He created the heavens and the earth. So everything comes out of the single point where God created it and it starts to expand, and over this portion of billions of years, God is planning and evolving what he wants to do and setting everything just right, because the universe and everything that's in it has to be in exactly the way it is, or we would not have sustainable life on Earth. It all had to be created perfect and just the way it is to have this sustainable life. No other planet right now shows that it could have any sustainable life, but all the planets in our solar system evolve, the way they rotate and pull, the orbits and everything, it's what keeps life the way it is in our planet. Okay, so we needed that. So you have this image that the universe is expanding, it's forming, it's coming into shape, it's this whole process, and finally now everything is right where it needs to be. And you might be saying, well, if it took billions of years to get to that point, why would God do that? He could have created it in a moment. Well, you got to understand that God created time. So billions of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, it doesn't matter to him. He existed beyond time, outside of time. When the universe is gone, God will still exist. So time does not mean anything to him like it does to us. So we have this image that possibly God created everything. As it came out of nothing and expanded and got to where it needed to be to have life, then God started the process of creating life. And then we have day one, where God created light, day and night, which could mean simply that he started rotating the earth so that we would have day and night as it's revolving around the sun. Maybe the earth wasn't spinning at this point. So we can see this way that the Genesis story can now make sense with science. So there's another idea here. Right? We have, sorry, before I get to the other idea, like I talked about, the Big Bang Theory, the big problem with the Big Bang Theory is that there's nothing, and everything from the universe expands from that nothing. And that is pretty much the same thing that we're saying from God, from the biblical account of what God did with creation. There was nothing, and from that nothing, and from a single point God, everything was created. Okay? So now, another theory that we have is the day-age view. And so with this day-age view, this aligns a little bit easier with science. And so with the day-age view, it is the idea that we talked about that not every day is a 24-hour day, right? It's that every day is a period of finite time that we call an age. And so that finite time could have been thousands of years, millions of years, it doesn't matter. But the whole point is that when we look at the story of creation, God created, and each day he had a specific thing he did, whether it was day and night, whether it was the sun and the moon and the stars, whether it was creating animals and people, or plant life and the birds of the air, the fish of the sea. Every day he had a specific thing that he created as part of the earth, the creation of the earth. And so we have those ages. And the start and finish of the age is when it says, and on that day there was day, and there was night, and there was day 5. And there was evening and night, and there was day 6. But when we get to day 7, we see a change. We see God rested. God's creative work is done. He is done creating the universe. He is done creating earth. He is done creating life. And so he rested. Well, it doesn't say that there was evening and there was day and there was night. It just says on day 7 God rested. So there was this belief that we are still in day 7. Day 7 has not ended. So God is still in this rest where he is not creating any new life from nothingness. He has already done it with the expansion of the universe and creating each thing and specifically focusing on Earth to make it sustainable for life. And once he has done that and put the process into place and made everything what it needed to sustain life, then he rested and went away from that creativeness. And now everything we see is a product of evolution after that point. Okay. So there's also a third option, and this is from the Reasons to Believe creation model. And what they have done is, instead of trying to marry religion and science, what they have done is they've married the Bible to nature. And what the idea behind that is that nature does not change. The laws of nature are constant, are steady. Since God created the world, the laws of nature have not changed. Right? The Bible has not changed. And we look at the two, they are come together in harmony. And so the reason why they don't consider the science as harmony is because science is created by people based on their understanding of nature. And as people study and understand nature and they create science to explain it, and then when we test it, sometimes we find out that the science is wrong. And then we got to go back to the drawing board and start over. And so the idea is that with science may be flawed, but nature is not. And so when we look at nature, we should be able to look at nature, look at the Bible, and the two should sync together because God created them. And so when we look at it in that manner, it shows that the earth can be several million years old based on the stars. Right? Nature shows us several million years old, as we talked about earlier, and this theory embraces that. But it also says that the Bible teaches that. The Bible teaches that the earth is old, and it's the way it refers to the Bible, the way the different passages in the Bible talk about the mountains being ancient, whatever. It's clear in the Bible that the earth is not young. Okay. Now, when we look at and we talk about all these different theories, right? They all have merit. They all have value, and you can look at them and make a decision for what you want to believe. But it's important to understand. What's important to understand here is that no matter what you believe, whether you believe that God created the earth in 6 days and the whole universe at the same time, whether you believe that he created the universe and then 13 billion years later he formed everything in the earth to be what it is now, or you just believe that everything was slowly created over billions of years, it doesn't matter. None of that is that important. What matters is when we look at the universe, we look at what God created, it matters that we understand that God created us for a purpose, and that we are here, and salvation through Jesus is the most important thing. And so when we look at the science, and people want to bicker and fight, right? The science can change, and it has changed over the last 200 years. 200 years ago, we would have said, if you would have told a scientist that the earth had a beginning, they would have told you were crazy. Now we have proven that the earth had a beginning. The Bible said that over 2,000 years ago. Right? So science is now catching up with what the Bible has already said. So instead of pitting this war, creation, this war over creation between religion and science, between the Bible and evolution, what we should be looking at is how can we look to God's creation and prove the Bible true. And that's what it all comes down to. So if you have any questions, I'd like to take those now. And right here, I've listed all the sources that I have. And if you'd like to talk more later, we can. And if you would like to just borrow some books or look up some books to read, here are some great books that give a whole lot of insight into the creation of the universe from both a scientific and a biblical perspective. Have a great night. Thank you.